Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Paranormal Brew. I'm your host, Taryn Kerper, and I have a very special guest with me tonight, an amazing woman in the paranormal field. She hosts the very well known and awesome show, Truth or Demons podcast. Um, I'm so blessed to have this woman in my life. She's so supportive and such a good person. If you don't follow her podcast, please go check her out on YouTube and I believe Facebook. I have to just confirm that with her. She's also on Patreon. She does special things on Patreon for people. But we'll get into all of that. I do want to say that I am amidst a little bit of a maybe possibly an emergency with my cat. So I'm going to do the best I can to, we're going to do this. I want you guys to meet Stevi. And please, if you don't follow her podcast, please go follow it. So without further ado, let me bring on this beautiful, gorgeous woman, Stevi.
Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be here.
Excited for you to be here. Thank you so much for coming on. I know you are so busy with everything that you do. And I literally admire you. I think what you do is awesome. I respect what you do. I love how we'll get into all of it. But you work with an attorney with your podcast, so you make sure the things you can and can't say. So you do things kind of, on the up and up. You do your research. You talk to all parties involved. And I love that. It's not just a one-sided type of a thing. So I'm going to stop talking. I want you to just kind of, for anybody that doesn't know you, a little bit of your background. How'd you get into were you into the paranormal first, and then you were like, wait a minute, these things seem kind of weird. I want to look at on the scientific or the debunking side of it, or do you do both? Like, how did you get to Truth or Demons podcast?
Well, I got to it because, first of all, I am really into the paranormal. I have been since I was a really little kid. The movies were what turned me on to paranormal. Any film that came out that said based on a true story and it was a ghost story, I was all about. And then the Conjuring movie happened, and I was super excited because having this history of loving these movies based on these real life ghost stories, I was super thrilled to see this one come to life because I'd heard of the Warrens, but I wasn't super familiar with their cases. I grew up in the era of Lorraine being on Paranormal State with Ryan Buell. That was my introduction to Lorraine. So I was excited to see this film and see what they were all about. And then I was really super stressed about the film because I knew that the way they depicted it couldn't have been what really happened, which led me to this deep dive into a rabbit hole I didn't even know existed, finding out about Bathsheba Sherman and her real identity and how they blamed this story on this real person it didn't have anything to do with. And that's what led me to making the podcast. I felt like there's this whole world of people that saw this movie and thought, oh my God, that's real. That's what happened. And then they're blaming this poor woman. And then in reality, her grave was vandalized and it went to that extreme. And so that's where the podcast started. I decided that I wanted to deep dive Ed and Lorraine Warren cases and present the facts that I could find, the personal anecdotes, people I could interview and speak to that were there, Find newspaper articles, anything I could find that went into what really happened versus what the movies showed you.
So was it the Conjuring House one that got you started, or was it? I mean, I guess that was like the first big movie about the Warrens, correct?
Yeah,
The Conjuring House, right?
yeah, and that was my first deep dive into the truth because I didn't realize that like before that movie, I didn't realize those based on a true story films were so far from the truth most of the time. And that's how I ended up down all those rabbit holes because I found other movies like one of my favorite ghost stories of all time is the movie The Entity, and I found out a lot about its reality and stuff. Yeah, that's what turned me on to the paranormal. That movie, I love that movie still. It scared the crap out of me. The scariest movie I've ever seen.
It's the scariest movie I've ever seen. And I had Ben Radford and Kenny Biddle on to talk about that case. And even though they ruined the story behind it for me, because I was like, it makes it a lot more scarier when you think it's real. I guess that's
Mhm.
the thing, right? But I was like, it still scares me. I still won't be able to watch it in the dark by myself. Like I just
Right.
do it. It's still the scariest movie I've ever seen. I'm sorry.
Yes, same. Agreed. I used to go to school and tell people the story of this movie and scare the crap out of everyone in school.
It's so scary. Like, so all right. So I have a lot of questions. So you you start going down this rabbit hole, right? And I mean, how were you thinking, like, if I start to present this to the community, people are going to hate me, they're going to like bash me because the Warrens are so have this love,
Yes,
people love them.
yes, I was actually pretty worried about that. And I did a convention when my podcast was very new. There was this local thing happening. So I did it and I had a little booth, and people would come up to my booth and ask me what my podcast was about. And I would say, well, it's kind of about the truth and facts behind the Warrens cases. And as soon as I said Warrens, everyone was like, oh my God, I love the Warrens. That's so cool. And I'd be like, my work is more like disproving the Warrens, and they'd be like, "What?" So there was definitely nervous moments, and then I when I got my first 1-star review on the podcast, it was very new, and I had a 1 star, and it was because I was quote unquote trash talking the Warrens simply because I was presenting some facts. So yeah, it was definitely a little like nerve-wracking at first, but then I kind of got past it because I started getting so much support from like people like you and Kenny for the work I was doing, and I didn't realize there was such a big community of people like that too, so that made it all worth it.
Well, when you have people that really want to investigate and really want to find the truth, right? Um, uh, when you feel duped, or when you learn you might be duped, it's kind of disheartening, and it kind of like, it's not like you get mad, but you get kind of like, okay, like, I need to learn. I mean, that's part of our process of growing and learning. You know what I mean? Is to being able to accept that the things that you once believed in, or things that you believed in, or you thought were real, or not real or real. Accepting that it's it could be the opposite, right? And I have to admit that I have never really followed the Warrens that closely. I just kind of followed the masses, if you will. I never really like took the time to like look into anything that they did or didn't do, because I was that person that was like, okay, I believe everything that because they were the mass, they were loved by the masses, right? And now, and I don't know if it's with age and with education and knowing Kenny and knowing all these other people that have, really, taught me a lot of the other side of like the scientific side, or the educational side of ghost hunting, if you will. um Now, I look back, and I see things, I see interviews, and I see some, I'm like, wow, like, yeah, I totally can see the, I don't know what word I'm looking for, the manipulation, maybe, I don't know, or I don't know what
The
word to use.
patterns, yeah.
Yeah, you don't realize, the like. until it's brought to the forefront, like the type of people
Yep.
they were. So did it start with just one thing and then all of a sudden you're like, I mean, you have a podcast surrounded about this, right? So
Yep.
obviously, I mean, they've had what? How many cases have the Warrens had? Do you know?
They claim, so like it's really funny because there's no one really knows the answer to that, but they claim anywhere from 1,000 to 10,000. I've heard different numbers in different interviews.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's a lot.
Yeah, and then of course they don't have a lot of main cases that people like really are familiar with. Like you, of course, like I try to start at the beginning and go chronologically. So like you had Annabelle, which was one of their first stories that became big, and then Amityville, they inserted themselves there. They didn't really do much except that one seance situation, and then they had after that was the Perrin family haunting, and then they had the Arnie Cheyenne Johnson case. And, I forgot the Infield's in there too, but they didn't really go to Infield. That was another thing. The Infield movie is almost 100% false. Ed went the first time he visited them by himself and was there for a couple hours. Guy Lyon Playfair even said he met Ed, and Ed said something about making money, and it completely turned him off, and he didn't want nothing to do with Ed anymore. So they didn't really have a part in that. But then after that was the Arnie Cheyenne Johnson case. And then you get into the ones people are a little more familiar with from the 80s and 90s, which would be like the Smurl case and then the Snedeker case. And so like there's some famous cases that people know, and sometimes they don't even know that they're Warrens cases. Like the Snedeker case had a movie, but didn't involve the Warrens at all. So, and that was the A Haunting in Connecticut.
I thought they weren't a part of that.
They were, but the movie, when they made A Haunting in Connecticut, they left the Warrens out.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I thought so too. Because when I started doing the research and realized that that was one of their cases, I was like, they're not in the movie though. And the movie, I loved the movie. I thought the movie's really fun. But then when you start picking apart that story, it's really awful as well.
What would you say would be one of the most deceiving cases that you've come across when you have been, going through the Warrens' life? Like, what do you feel is the biggest deceived case that they've presented?
I would say probably the Perrin case, just because of the movie. Before the movie, they weren't really perpetuating it as. They were still calling her Bathsheba, which they were doing lectures and talking about her, but they weren't really given permission to do anything past their lectures. But they twisted maybe the Arnie Cheyenne Johnson case because of that being so public and also involving the law. So that one was crazy because they even went as far as to say they contacted police before it happened to like give us a warning of a psychic vision Lorraine had. And I just thought that whole story was a bit twisted because a murder was involved, like a life was taken, and all they care about is proving demonic possession.
So it's funny you bring this up because again, I never really followed the Warrens that closely, but me and the Peaches, I'm part of Paranormal Peaches, and we were going to Mohegan Sun for the weekend. We had no idea that this Paracon was happening. This Warren's Paracon was happening. It was the first one that they were having. When something popped up on one of our feeds, and we were like, "Wow, let's check it out." We can, we had free tickets. We had, what I mean. So like, we went, and Arnie Johnson was there, and I'm like, "Who's Arnie? Who is this guy?" Right? And then somebody said, "Well, he." Murdered somebody, but the Warrens went to court with him saying that this was it a dragon, a toy was possessed, and it jumped into him, and I go, hold on a second, and now my like morals and all this stuff kicks in. I go, so wait, this guy murdered somebody, said that it was because he was possessed by something that was possessed in a toy and it jumped into him. I was like, and now he's sitting here making money off of this, and he killed someone. I was like, that's disgusting. Like I that second I could not believe that this person was just parading in this event, making money, and I was like, this is crazy. And then I think at that moment I started to look around the room because I was in the museum part where they had like all these items, and in the center of it was Lorraine's suit. I could be wrong, but it was like the typewriter, a Bible, the pad of paper they use. I said, this is like presented like this is JFK's belongings,
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
I've heard that before. I've never seen it, but I've heard about that before. Yeah.
And I'm like, this is crazy. And at that moment, and then you had the Annabelle, and there's people walking around telling stories like, oh, the guy that handled Annabelle went to the hospital and he's like falling over, he's sick, and this and that. And I'm like, wow. That was when I started to like question a little bit. Now, I don't know where he stands in all this. I do have a respect for John Zaffis. I do like
Mhm.
John. Um,
Same. Yeah.
yeah, I do like John Zaffis. He's a friend of mine. I do love him. He's been on my show. But it's some one of those things like he's like, well, I won't talk about it, and that's fine. I respect that, but but it's crazy. You've grown up just believing that these people were these helping all these people, but in reality, were they really helping these people? I mean,
Yeah.
I think when I don't think were they involved in the entity case? They were, right?
So okay, so it's funny that you say that because Ed I heard a rumor. I can't remember where I heard this, but of course it was just hearsay, which I've heard a lot of hearsay and rumors. But Ed liked to lay claim to several things. I do believe I heard him say, oh no, that's what it was. Someone heard him in a lecture mention that he had been a part of that. Just in a lecture. That's the only time anyone's ever heard of it being mentioned. And then he also said he was part of the Exorcist case.
Really?
Yes, which was untrue, but yeah, he would tell people that he was present for and a part of it.
Wow. And like this stuff is like so easily provable. Like that stuff is easily provable, right? I mean,
Mhm.
but back then were people really
Right,
people weren't
there
doing
was no way to verify back then. Like you didn't have Google. You if you wanted to ask the people, it was a slim chance because they were so closed off already. And yeah,
Yeah, I mean, this is why I do support what you do because like the Arnie Johnsons and this and that, like these people should not be making money off
right.
of off of crimes, and no matter what type of crime, murder would obviously be the worst, right?
Yeah, and
But
technically, there's a law that states anyone who commits such a crime, like such as murder, it's called the Son of Sam law, and it states that someone who commits those crimes cannot profit from them. So he's not technically supposed to be profiting from them. So there's speculation that he is, and he's not supposed to be.
wow, what happened? Give me 1 second.
You're good.
So they said he's okay with that milligram?
No, he's way overdosed.
Way overdosed.
But he's high as a goddamn.
But they said he'll be okay. Did you tell him? What?
In the morning, he said he could probably tell the difference.
But do we have to do anything?
He's got to run his course.
We-
But I got all the chats. I can show you. And I told him we may be back. We can go back to it as much as we want to.
I'm just reading the comments, and I agree with everybody.
What?
I know we did. We paid for it, so I know we can go back.
Okay. Did you ask about the charcoal?
Yeah, but he just said you have to let it run its course, and the only thing you do it's a mile.
He's not going to die.
He did not say that was an issue. He just said he's extremely overdosed.
Okay.
He said basically he's a high as a guy.
Okay.
So
Okay.
enjoy the trip.
Sorry about that. We
You are good.
just before I went on here, I apologize, everybody. Just before we came on, we found out that my cat was extremely overdosed with tramadol. So my fiance was on the phone with the emergency vet, trying to find out if he was going to, because it's crazy what's happening. So I just wanted to make sure he was okay. So I apologize. I'm back,
You're
and
totally good.
he's in here with me, so I'm just keeping an eye on him. So nobody likes liars. That's so true. Which is why I like people. I love people that like Stevie and Kenny, and I love Kenny. I mean, you guys do get a lot of backlash from people that just refuse to listen and to learn that you know the that there's other possibilities out there. I mean, that's part of investigating, that's part of research, that's part of what we do to find the truth, you know. I don't think you or Kenny or anybody out there is out there to be like, and I keep using Kenny because he's in the chat, so I'm sorry, Kenny, I love you, I love you, but I don't think they're out there to like say like, you guys suck, there's no such thing as ghosts, there's no such thing as, but when somebody is presenting as such, you know what I mean, like this is absolute fact, when there's holes and there's questions and the questions can't be answered and there's the holes can't be filled in,
Right.
Obviously something else to the story.
Yeah. And a lot of people think that the debunking community is doing it out of malice, and it's really out of love. We want people to be able to experience things without being fooled, without being lied to, without being misled, without being misinformed. Because when you go and you share what you learned, if you share it and someone comes at you and is like, no, you're wrong, that's not true, it's like then you have an argument with whoever you're talking about, when you could have just like got the information and learned and been educated on it, versus just being so opposed because you think it's going to be negative.
Right. Somebody's asking, weren't they asked to leave the Enfield house in the UK?
So yeah, not really asked to leave. It was more of, so Ed showed up uninvited by himself for the first visit. He did some recordings. He wasn't by himself. He had some assistants, but Lorraine was not with him. And then they came back and they had a couple more visits, and it wasn't like, the big long stay that they portray in the movie. They were there for a brief period, but they were kind of pushed out because the investigators that were already there, Morris Gross and Guy Lyon Playfair, they didn't want them there trying to profit off of it, because they immediately expressed to Guy Lyon Playfair, we can make you some money. And he said he wasn't interested at all.
Interesting. Kenny said Ed was more about ego and profit than anything to do with helping people. Yeah.
It really seemed like that a lot of the time, for sure.
Yeah. And so it was going on back then too.
Yeah, I've been reading newspaper articles from as far back as I could find that involved the Warrens, and I've been noticing, like each week I read an article in chronological order and time, and each article is a progression in their career. And it actually started, it was just Ed. He didn't have Lorraine going to things with him. There's an article about him attending a seance, and there was another medium there that he was learning from. And then there was another article where he was helping at a haunted house and he brought his psychic that wasn't Lorraine. So it's interesting to see this progression in the newspaper of how their career kind of evolved.
So I think we in our chat, we watched, there was a segment from the Sally Jesse Raphael show.
Yes.
Right?
That one was about the Snedeker family.
Okay, so I'm watching this, and I'm like, okay, first of all, the mother of it was, I mean, she was like, it was almost like it was scripted, and it was almost as if she wouldn't let anybody answer because she was afraid they were going to say the wrong thing.
Yeah. That was a big speculation for sure.
And to put these people, I mean, even her kid, like to put her kids on a platform like that on this national television. I mean, Sally Jesse Raphael was it was a national television show, wasn't it? I mean,
it's a big deal.
Yeah, you put your kids out there like that, your own children out there like that, and then they brought on Ed and Lorraine, and I've never seen, like, again, I was not a big follower of Ed and Lorraine, but I've never seen that type of reaction. I mean, he was like yelling at people, and
he was freaking out.
Yeah, like holy crap,
Did you happen to get to the other part where they bring on the bed?
Yes, and she was
that blew my mind. I couldn't believe they did that.
The actual bed. And it's crazy because I'm actually dealing with a private case right now where the claims of this family sound similar to the claims of this woman.
Wow.
So now I'm like, is she just what, you know what I mean? She's a sweet woman, but things sound similar. The whole something's in my bed, I feel it at night, and it's like, and like every,
Yeah.
a lot of the stuff sounds similar, you
Yeah.
know? And I so now I'm like, okay, I'm glad I watched that because now I'm handling the case a little bit different. Not saying that she's
No,
not,
no, definitely.
but
It's good to have your information in all directions versus just one side for sure.
yeah.
And did you know also that that family that was on Sally Jesse Raphael, they were accused of taking inspiration from the Entity case?
Oh, really?
Yeah, because
Wow.
apparently they had gone to see the movie in theaters and then were talking about it like crazy after, and then all of a sudden their ghost story has similar aspects as the movie.
Wow. Wow. Um, I want to talk about like I know you talk about the Conjuring house a lot and the but what I mean, can we pick one that you can kind of like go through with me like how you did the research and what you found out and a lot of people's misconceptions. I mean, it could be whatever one you want to talk about. Um, I would love to hear about all of them, but of course we'd be here for 3 or 4 hours, right? So like, is there one case that that you love to I don't know if I'm using the right words, but
That's a good question, and I have a hard time picking one because I've found like aspects in each story that have just been so interesting to me. But I guess my favorite one probably would be Annabelle because of finding, not only did I find who I think is her original owner, as far as like there's this old 1975 newspaper article, and there's a photo of these two women that are supposed to be the two nurses, and one of the women is holding Annabelle. Well, I located that woman holding Annabelle, and in my opinion, and my viewers' opinion, they agreed that this woman looks identical to this old photo, and she just happened to be on Facebook announcing that Annabelle was her doll and that she was the original owner. And then when I tried to speak to her, I couldn't get her to talk. She didn't want to do any kind of interview or anything, but she did say one of her comments was Hollywood twists everything, and she wouldn't further elaborate. So I thought that was so interesting. And then I also found the woman who wrote that article that she's pictured in, and I interviewed her. And she talked about how she met with Ed and Lorraine, how they talked about the doll. The nurses told their story because she was there and sat down with them to write this article. And she talked about different aspects that we know today, like the doll was writing notes, the guy got scratched, and that was an interesting part too, because the story goes, there's different versions throughout time. Ed tells it differently. Tony Spira, his son-in-law, tells it differently. It's different in the book from how they tell it. So there's like one story where the man is scratched on his back. There's one story where the man is scratched on his stomach. There's one story where the man is scratched on his stomach or on his chest. So there's 3 different locations. One of the stories he's scratched on his chest and his stomach. And then the article that this woman wrote, it says the body. So there was no specification. So it's like you can't even fact check the story because it wasn't ever specified in the original telling.
I mean, it's just, and even like that, like if your story isn't consistent, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like it's crazy like how many people actually just believed the lot, like believed what they were saying. Like they just nobody actually took the time to. I mean, I'm not going to say nobody. I'm sure there was people out there that were question. I'm sure there were skeptics back then, and there were
Mhm.
non-believers back then, and probably. But like we were saying earlier, the resources to investigate those claims weren't as easy as it is today. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
um,
And I
Megan.
think skeptics were hated a little more back then too, because I think you have in that Jesse Raphael video episode, isn't it? I think it's Joe Nickel. Is that right? Victor knows. He told me. But there's a skeptic in it that Ed's arguing with, and this man seems to catch so much hate from like the audience and stuff because they all want to believe so badly. They want this to be real. They want to support this family who's experienced this traumatic thing. And then you have this man saying, no, this is science. This is what really happened. You know, this can't be real. And everybody's hating on him.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's true. I mean, some of the questions that came from the audience were good. I mean, there were some questions that were that, questioning, but then, I mean, again, you get the people on the stage have the voice, right? So, and Ed is he's a very strong, I
Yeah,
don't know I don't know what to call a very strong like presence, and he's
right.
over, so I mean he takes over basically.
And they got so combative when someone came to them with questions that didn't align with what they were saying.
Right, and that's like a very big sign of somebody
Yeah.
that's not being truthful. Megan says, what was the case that was made for TV movie in the 90s? The Warrens were part of that.
So I think that was the Arnie Cheyenne Johnson case. They actually, because that happened in 81, and like immediately after they made a made for TV, and they had an old couple in it that was supposed to be Ed and Lorraine. That might be the one I think that she mentioned that she's thinking of, because it didn't, I can't remember. It was Kevin Bacon was in it. And I think he played Arnie Cheyenne Johnson. And I think that's the one she's referring to.
So he's not supposed to be making money off of.
Right. According to the Son of Sam law, he is not supposed to profit from the murder story.
I mean, I can't imagine being the family of those people, the family of the person murdered, and knowing that this man is out there.
Yeah. So that's the really sad part about it. This is actually my next main episode that's coming out. I just finished writing it and doing my interviews. I just have to put it all together. I'm so excited. It's going to be so good.
Okay.
There's so much information. But one of the things is Alan Bono was the victim, and there's nothing about him. He had a sister who lived in Florida. We know that. He was from Australia. We know that. He ran the dog kennel. We know that. But like aside from that, they even changed this poor man's name in the movie. Like they didn't even credit him by his own name in the film. And that hurt my heart for this man, because he is the victim. He died at the hands of someone who thought it would be okay to say, oh, I was possessed by a demon and that's why I did it.
Yeah, that's so, and then, to I mean, I don't know if he still is a part of the Warren Paracon.
I don't think he's done anything recently, but up until last year, I think he was doing conventions.
I mean, and if I'm sorry, if I was, I mean, I guess the Warren, I mean, it's Tony Sparrow and them, so of course they don't care. But if I'm having a convention, I am not going to support that. You know what I mean? Like I would never support something like that. Like for me, my own morals and integrity and stuff like that. Like a long list of reasons why I wouldn't. It would be like it kind of reminds me of, and I know this has nothing to do with paranormal, but O.J. Simpson writing the book. I don't know if you ever saw the book, and it was like, if I did it, and if was in white, and I did it was in red, the writing.
Yeah.
And he writes this book while in prison as if I did it, like trying to profit off of what we all know he did it. Okay. Everybody knows he did it, but trying to profit off that, which thank God the family then took him, any sales he made went to them. Thank God. Right.
Good. Yeah. Yeah.
But that's what it reminded me of as I'm looking at this man, and I'm like, I'm not getting a photo with him. I don't care. Like, I think it's gross that he's here.
Yeah.
I'm happy that you're covering. I can't wait to watch that. We won't talk too much about that so that we can save it for your big show. But that one, I just remember thinking like, wow, why would they defend that? Why would they use it? Like, to me, that's just not good. It's not.
I agree. Yeah. And they portray him. When they put him out there, he comes off as this sweet, soft-spoken, gentle person, but I have spoken to enough people that know him personally to know that's an act.
It doesn't surprise me. Now, can we go back to the Amityville? You said were they they were kind of involved with the Amityville. Like they were. I don't. I feel like I've heard different. Like I've had Carl Johnson on, right? And Carl Johnson
Mhm.
actually was I think, and he can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sorry if I'm telling this, but Carl Johnson was stating that the case actually come to them, and they actually reached out to the Warrens and kind of brought them in. They briefly worked together at the place. There's a picture of the Warrens with Carl Johnson at the home, but to my understanding, they weren't that involved.
Right. They were kind of involved. So the whole thing happened, the whole situation with the family happened. They went through their haunting. They did their 20 some days in the house before they fled. And then after they fled was when the Warrens got involved, because that's when media started getting involved. They started telling their story, going public with it. The news anchor, Marvin Scott, I think, wanted to do that televised thing where they did the seance, and then the Warrens were called in and brought in on that with a bunch of other people, and that's where a lot of the photos come from. That photo that they claimed was the spirit of a little boy, but
Yeah.
he did an awesome job debunking that. That was that night when they did that. And then according to George Lutz, he talks about how he spoke with the Warrens a few times, apparently told them he refused to come back to the house. They could go if they wanted, but he wouldn't. Apparently they went and met with him in the town he had moved to. And there is a story. So the oldest boy, Danny, did a documentary called My Amityville Horror. And there is a scene where he brings in Lorraine, and they kind of reminisce a little bit about how she apparently went out to California to visit them, and he didn't have a memory of it. So I thought that was kind of interesting that she would say that, but he didn't have a memory of it, and then there's not really record of it. So it's interesting that they are involved, but they're not, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's also interesting, and I'm going to go back to the Snedeker, right? They were the ones that were on
Yes.
Digest Rail. So the
Mhm.
Snedeker people, the people that have moved in after, nothing ever happened to them.
Right. And
Amityville,
also, they had other people living in the house too. It was like a divided house in like an apartment situation where it was top and bottom or something like that. And the other resident living in the same exact building wasn't experiencing anything.
and it was the same thing with the Amityville house. Like the people there that have lived there after said nothing ever happened.
Yep.
I actually, excuse me, um, I can't remember when this was. I'm going to guesstimate a time frame. Probably 2018, 19. There was a convention in Gettysburg called Phenomenology, and Christopher Lutz was there. And again, not knowing much about that kind of stuff, I was an enthusiast at the time, so I was kind of just, whatever. And we talked. Him and I talked for about an hour, and I remember him saying that he didn't want to. He didn't want to come out with the truth until his mom had passed away. But he said that the house had definitely had stuff, but he blamed his stepfather for, I'm going to use a word, conjuring up whatever else happened then because he was in the basement doing
Yeah. Danny
satanic.
said similar. He said it was George.
Yeah, yeah. And he said, I guess that's why then they were into a suing battle and this and that. But he said, he blamed George. He said in the movie made him out to be this savior, like he saved our family, and he was the one that was, they believe, causing what was ever going on in the house, And again, he waited. He didn't come out with it because he said he didn't want it to affect his mom.
Yeah.
When I was talking to him, I was definitely like, it was an interesting conversation. And for me, I'm looking at this person at the time believing the story that happened in the house, right? So I'm thinking like, this person was like, and there definitely probably was trauma in the house. Definitely trauma.
Yeah.
From George. Do you know what I mean? To the kids. I believe he said that his sister like was at a convent. She lives under the radar somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
She's never spoken to anybody that I know of.
yeah, and she's like, and I mean, he was like literally like was very Bible-y talking and very like, he said that he did think that whatever was happening was following him because he said when he went to buy a house, that the former owners had left some things behind, and when he went in the basement, um, there was all these books on the Amityville horror house
Oh
in the
wow.
yeah. He said, I can't remember if he said he decided to leave the house and not take it, or if he did move in and he burned all the books and stuff. I mean, he wanted to get away from it. Like he
Yeah.
didn't want that whole stigma of it. Now, I've lost contact with him since. I mean, I think he got real real political and stuff.
Yeah. I
Oh,
followed his social media until he disappeared. Yeah, and I tried to reach out, but I never did hear back.
oh, really? You did?
I didn't. Yeah, he added me on Facebook, but he never wrote me back.
Huh. Um, and I also remember when I was a part of one of when did the first Conjuring come out?
2013, I think.
Okay, so yeah, I was a part of this. So I'm right. So I was a part of a paranormal group, and the person that was the director of that group, a lot of people know him. Um, his uh, his initials are D and a J. Um, he said I remember him telling me that the Conjuring house was all real except for the part where the mom that got lifted up with the chair and the chair flipping over. And I believe that, like, but again,
That's funny you say that because Andrea says that happens. That happened. Her mom did fall, was levitated and fell on her head and was knocked out for like 45 minutes. And that's when Roger punched Ed in the face and threw him out.
interesting. Well, listen, I mean, even Andrea's story kind of changes, right? I mean,
Oh,
her story has changed. And I remember talking to her one night, and she started to tell me that she
yeah.
believes that there's been aliens there the whole time, and the aliens are the ones that were doing all this, And I don't know if that was her story changed because how many times can you tell the same story, or the story changed because there were people coming out debunking, if you will, for lack of a better description, debunking what actually occurred at the house and the history,
Yeah.
you know?
I honestly have no idea what triggered that, but yeah, it's very interesting that she says it's aliens now.
So, because you've come out to debunk, or not debunk, I would say, kind of question claims that the Warrens have done, that came then with the Tony Spera and them. Has Judy ever? It's always Tony and Dan, and has Judy ever
Nope.
commented?
I have heard from, like through the grapevine, I have heard that she refuses to be a part of it. She doesn't want anything to do with it. She doesn't care. Like she just doesn't want any part of it.
But it almost feels like, and correct me if I'm wrong, like, and I haven't watched that much, but I almost feel like Ed was the same, like Ed was the dominant in that relationship, where a lot of times, a lot of the interviews you see, like Lorraine was kind of just, and I'm not taking any of the blame from her in what occurred, but she seemed to be the one that was like, kind of like, she would always sit in his shadow, basically.
Mhm.
And he was like this dominant person, like spearheading all of this.
Yeah. And it's funny because I have heard personal accounts from people who knew them who claim that that was the way it was. And then I have the opposite. Like I have some that claim that Ed was overbearing and Lorraine was really sweet and kind. And then I have some that say Lorraine was the powerhouse and she was the one who was calling the shots and she was kind of mean. I've heard she was a drunk. Like, it's interesting to me the different anecdotes about them from people that grew up knowing them, people that met them one time, people that met them when they were children. Like I've heard so many different accounts, firsthand accounts of experiences and interactions with the Warrens, and there's so many.
Yeah, I mean, and there is so many. I mean, even like I said, like I know I'm jumping back and forth to The Conjuring and the haunting in Connecticut, and this and that, but I mean, I keep going back to because this is the last thing I watched was that Sally Jesse Raphael thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I mean, her son had cancer, correct? I mean, and I feel like maybe she thought she was going to get a little bit more sympathy because of that fact. I mean, I don't know. It just, I mean, when you step back and you look in, you do see
Mhm.
the you see the fraudulent behavior. You see
Do
it.
you, yeah. Do you know about what went down with the boy after the cancer situation?
No. Did he have cancer for real or he didn't have cancer?
He did. I'm pretty sure he beat it, but then there was a situation of mental illness, and also he was inappropriately uh, messing with his cousin. The girl that's in the Sally Jessica Raphael video with her, and Carmen keeps like talking for her, her niece. Apparently, he had gone after her, and some speculate that she translated the abuse from him into abuse from a ghost.
Oh.
Yeah, the story does get worse and worse. Like the more you deep dive the Snedeker case, there are a lot of things about that story that are hard to take in, and I think that's why people don't. They just hear it as like they hear it from the movie or like from the interviews on TV. They don't really look past that, and they, like you said, they sympathize with this woman and her son with cancer, and then that's it.
Wow. And, it's unlike the entity case because the entity case that definitely was. I really do think, that there was some medical illness going on there with her. There was something going on, and again, the people didn't help her. It's similar to like they just wanted the attention,
Yeah,
the supposed investigators or the supposed
yeah,
demonologists or the supposed whatever, like, they wanted the attention of the case, but they weren't helping these people. It's like The Conjuring, like the lady Jackie now. I
yeah,
mean, she needs help, right? And
yeah.
the people around her aren't getting her help. And I'm
People
not
find
saying
the paranormal aspect of it way more fascinating, and they want to gossip about it versus like what really could be going on.
and but there's but where do you draw the line of, it's like the paranormal is it really paranormal? If it's not paranormal, why are we continuing to feed these people's demons? And when I say demons, I don't mean
Yeah,
real demons.
yeah, right, exactly. And then you have like, so with Jacqueline, there was actually a man, I can't remember his name. It was a brief thing I saw, someone showed me. There was someone trying to corroborate the idea that it was the evil spirits in the home affecting her because this man said he spent some time living there and he was affected in the same way. And I thought, that's not helping. That's that's not what she's dealing with. There is much more happening. I mean, clearly she has been in trouble for some things that we can see physically going on, like drinking or whatever, because of the body cam. But like, no one's helping those things. They're just talking about, oh, it could be demons, or it could be the house is causing her to be like this.
Wow. Um, Jen Jones, I watched a documentary on that where she was going off about the Warrens. She was mainly talking about financial issues and how she was promised things she never got.
She's talking about Judy Glatzel. Judy Glatzel was the mother of, so the Arnie Cheyenne Johnson case. That's funny that you took it in as Arnie got the demon from the dinosaur. The demon actually came from a little boy named David Glatzel, and Judy Glatzel was his mom. And they, at some point, decided this little boy was possessed and contacted the Warrens. The Warrens come in, they do these things. They tell Judy exactly what David's going to do. David hears him. David does exactly what he's expected to do as far as demonic possession goes. He curses, he acts violent, he, acts crazy, whatever. They did a whole documentary on Netflix called The Devil on Trial that covers this and what really happened, and it's really good. But yeah, so Judy, there is recordings on that documentary where Judy calls the Warrens and she's telling them, hey, any word on that money? Because, we could really use it. We need it just like you do, is pretty much the quote she says. And Lorraine comes back with, oh, yeah, don't worry about it. It's all taken care of. It's coming. But apparently the final situation of that is the Warrens made 80 grand off of that, and they made a few thousand, the Glatzel family.
Wow. And I promise you, there was a dinosaur because they had it at the convention.
Yeah. No, so what happened was David, while he was possessed, the little boy, apparently the dinosaur at one point during all the commotion of David's possession started talking and walking. This is untrue according to Carl Glatzel, David's older brother. He said that it was not a dinosaur, first of all. The Warrens have a dinosaur, but that's not the one that supposedly did this. They had a Godzilla doll that had wheels on it, and it happened to roll slightly on the floor, and they decided to jump on that and make it, this dinosaur is talking to us and being demonic.
Wow. And they actually went into a courtroom and tried to present this. Now, people that believe always say, well, a court isn't going to say, yeah, because then, then they have to say that paranormal is real or ghosts are real. And, all this is real. So they're never going to.
Right. And the judge shut it down. He said, no, I will not have that as a defense in my courtroom. Do something else. And then they went with self-defense.
Self-defense.
Yeah. And he was not found guilty of murder. He was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter and got 10 to 20 and did 5.
That's just gross.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever heard? So, and I know this is, and this is me just being ignorant to the connections, right? There's a Warren Foundation that I believe also, is that Judy's son?
Yes, that is Chris McKinnell.
Okay.
And it's run by him. And the claim is there is absolutely no association with Nesper Tony's thing.
Right. So he doesn't speak to Judy?
Right. I'm pretty sure no. He definitely doesn't get along with Tony, but I don't know if he's on speaking terms with Judy or not. But I know that there's some animosity there.
Yeah, so it's very confusing because you have the Warren Foundation, you have the Warrens Paragon. I mean, Tony, even though Tony isn't Ed's son, Tony kind of reminds me of Ed.
Oh yeah, Tony wanted to be Ed. I personally believe that when Tony first came across Ed, it became his mission to become Ed. I think it led to him wanting to meet Judy. I think it led to him marrying Judy. I think it led to him, because he did that cable broadcast show he did where he interviewed them. That was all his idea. He wanted to be Ed.
Are you still finding things out with each case that they've done? Like, do you continue to find stuff out? And with each thing that you find out, do you do a new show about it and say, okay, I have to add this. I have to, do you ever find stuff out that you presented that you found out then wasn't?
All the time, to all of the above. I have part 2s I've done. I have part 2s in the works. Every time I'm writing an episode, that's why, I spent almost 2 years on the Arnie Cheyenne Johnson episode I'm working on, because I kept coming across things to add. And then I came across Carl when he did the Devil on Trial, the Netflix special. And then he was willing to talk, but he was under contract with Netflix. So I spent time working on the research and the writing until he was able to talk to me. And then I interviewed him. And so after a couple years, it finally all came together and I could put it out. But I guarantee once I put it out, there will be something else that comes forward and I have to make more bonuses or part 2s, or I've done that quite a bit. And I also learned things that I mess up. I was really kind of on a high horse for a minute with the Annabelle thing, because I was really frustrated with how Tony changes little details in the retellings of some of these stories. And he kept calling the characters of the Annabelle story Donna, Angie, and Lou. And I had listened to the Audible book, The Demonologist, and that's one of the very first mention of Annabelle in writing, but aside from the newspaper. And in that Audible version that was republished in 2013, for whatever reason, they changed the characters' names to Deirdre something and Cal. And I was like, why does Tony keep changing the names? And then I was interviewing this woman who actually interviewed the Warrens, when she was a little kid in school, she did it for her school paper. So she got to go to the museum and interview them and talk to them. And she was telling me about how she had the book, and she was talking about how she knew the Annabelle story and everything. And she says Donna, Angie, and Lou. And I say to her, like, those are the names that Tony uses. That it's actually Deirdre, Callan, whatever the other name was. And she's like, no, I have my book right here. And she tells me, she actually sends me a picture of the book and what it says. And I learned that I was kind of perpetuating misinformation in a sense. I was attacking Tony, saying he got it wrong when really I got it wrong. So I made sure I put that in an episode, that there are two sets of names in the same book. So I thought that was interesting.
Megan is saying, I know this is hearsay, but I heard that Ed was not Judy's biological father. Again, just what I heard, not saying true or not true.
That is the first time hearing of that. But the amount of hearsay that goes on amidst this family because of all the other scandals, I'm not surprised that that's something that's floating around.
It's so crazy to me that they got away with it for so long. I mean, Judy passed away, or not Judy, Lorraine passed away, what, a couple of years? I feel like it was only a couple of years.
I think.
Oh, was it that long ago?
I think so.
I mean, even up until that point, it wasn't until the Warrens Paracon where they were parading their stuff around where I started to like I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I was like,
Yeah.
you know, again, you know, you start to question as you do this longer, you know what I mean? You start to question things, and you have the Kenny Biddles and you have the Stevi Estes, you know, you're watching these shows, and, you know, so you start to question things. But like, I'm like, okay, these are supposed to be these demonic, horrible things that have done things to people and like can cause harm to people, yet you're parading them around the country.
Yeah, taking them on airplanes.
Yeah, and putting them in a big huge thing where people can pay money to possibly, like, you know what I mean? Like, let's just say for 1 second, it's true.
Mm-hmm.
And you're exposing people to,
without their knowledge sometimes too. Like, you're putting them in danger and they don't even know.
They don't realize, right? Like, let's just say for 1 second, you know, they had like this really creepy thing. I forget what it was called. It's like this big, tall demon. I forget what they called it.
Satanic.
Yeah.
Something.
It looks like it was made out of crepe paper with like, and painted.
The satanic idol. That's what they call it.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not gonna lie. Creep me out.
Yeah. It is really creepy. And they say they found that at like Sandy Hook or something.
Yes. That's creepier than Annabelle. I mean, like, I really don't find Annabelle creepy at all. Like, people, like, you know, I'm superstitious, but I don't believe, like, so if I ever went to see, is that Robert the doll or whatever, you know, you're supposed to ask all these, can I take your picture? Don't touch the glass. I would do all that stuff just because I'm superstitious.
Yeah.
Because I believe the doll's haunted. Let me see. Megan saying, Ed would tell the audience to turn off any recording devices. Oh, when they played the Enfield tapes, said they've had to go to people's homes that replay it. Never understood why they would play it in the first place. That's interesting.
That is interesting. Yeah, there's a recording that Ed had that he recorded Janet and her sister and their brother. And it's actually on YouTube now. I found it. Some random guy put it on YouTube. I pulled it off YouTube and had a sound guy clean it up so you could actually hear it, because it was terrible, terrible sound quality. And I know that they were really particular about the evidence they did share, and it was only ever shared in lectures and only from like the podium. And then they'd have people like stay after every now and then. They'd select people that they felt like sharing a little more with, and they'd share pictures and stuff. But that was the only time they shared evidence. So the fact that he would get upset with people for recording his recordings sounds about right, because I feel like he guarded these things like they were gold. And I think he eventually intended to do something a little bigger with them because they sold their life rights to make movies. So he definitely had like stars in his eyes as far as that goes. And I think that's just what it was. He was so protective of his quote unquote evidence because he didn't want anyone either to beat him to the punch or to expose him before he could put it out to the masses to take in and believe.
Since you've started doing this, have you gotten to, like, I'm sure when you first started out it was more, and I'm just going to use this for lack of better description, but hate mail. I mean, do you find that you're getting more and more support now, or do you find that it's equal or the same? Has that changed at all? Like, as far as the people that are, like, supporting and agreeing with you, when you first started out, like I said, when you first started out, probably everybody was, I mean, it's got to be a scary thing because the Lorraines were very big, right? I mean, they were very big in the paranormal field. So to step out of that and to be the person that says, wait a minute, this is what I found out. These people were not, you know what I mean? Like what everybody says they were.
At first, it was a little more opposed. A little more people were opposed to the idea of correcting the Warrens' legacy, I guess. And then now, I find that the majority of my viewers are in support of the research and of the things I share with them, and they're not. No one's really hateful. I have one person who has taken it upon herself to assume that everything I do is to bash the Warrens, and she doesn't even really take in the content or learn anything from it. So I think she's just so old school that she refuses to admit that regardless of the stories, there are different facts behind them. So whether or not they're exposing or detrimental to the Warrens' legacy, like she thinks I'm, that's all I'm about. Sometimes, like, I've interviewed people that love the Warrens. I've had people on that have told beautiful stories about the Warrens and their experiences with them. So it's interesting to see that the bigger my show gets, the more people are in support of it. I don't get a lot of hate like I did in the beginning. And it's not even really so much hate as just people telling me I'm wrong. And I get that. I used to get that a lot, that I didn't know what I was talking about. I didn't have connections like they did or whatever. And I was just trying to bash the Warrens. And then, so now it's really nice because people are like, oh, that's cool. I learned this from your show. And then I'll have people tell me, I watched your show and did you know this? And they'll tell me something I didn't know, which I think is really cool. So I love when people find my show and they're like, I have some more information for you. I think that's really fun.
That is cool. That's cool. I want to get to, I'm sorry. So I don't have my glasses on me. Mary Jane. Janet said that she was making the voices. She was learning to do ventriloquism and learned to throw her voice.
Yeah, that was Janet from the Infield Poltergeist. Yeah, that was determined also by, I'm pretty sure she's right that she admitted that at one point, but then also there was this woman, I can't think of her name now, but she was on the case too. And she determined that it was ventriloquism that Janet was doing.
I always feel so bad when I hear the recording of Annalise Michael.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she's the Exorcism of Emily Rose movie.
I was going to ask you if you've ever done anything with that. That's terrible.
That case is so intense. It's so heartbreaking. I have deep dived it a couple of times, and I did a little tiny mini deep dive on it on one of my lives where we talked about exorcisms and the things that go on in the world as far as like people getting injured and dying during an exorcism.
Well, to my knowledge, she starved to death.
Yeah, it was malnutrition and wasn't there something else? Malnutrition and something else. But yeah, she was, and then so it was tough because in the case, the priest claimed that they tried to get her to eat or whatever, and she refused. So they just stopped, I guess. And then there was the argument, well, she wasn't in her right mind, so you should have force fed her, kind of thing.
So let's see. Yeah, the movie was based on The Exorcist. Yeah, Emily Rose. Yeah.
Yeah, there was so much back and forth and arguing over why what wasn't working and why she ended up how she was and stuff. Yeah, it was pretty sad. And the parents were so devout that they didn't believe that she needed medical. They just believed she needed religious intervention.
That's crazy. That's so crazy. That poor girl, what she went through definitely was needed medical.
Yeah,
Um,
and that priest that was her in charge of her exorcism, he was found out to have been a little nuts and really into the attention that because like this case was one of they had like one of the most amount of exorcisms in a case. Like there were so many back-to-back exorcisms over this long period of time, and then they found out that this priest just liked the attention apparently, and that's why he drugged them out so long and he reported on them so much. And a lot of people said it was a lot of it was his fault.
that's a shame. Again, these people are desperately searching for help, and they think that who they are going to, these trusted people, you know what I mean, and instead of deeming this like getting them medical attention or medical intervention,
Yep.
this is what happens. And that's why it's important for people like you, for people like Kenny, for people that it's important for people to hear this stuff, because or else everybody would just be doing this all the time and
Yep.
ignoring what possibly could really be going on with someone.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
Yeah,
with the David Glatzel possession when Ed and Lorraine came in and they were trying to get an exorcism approved and stuff. So what happened was they knew at one point that they needed a mental evaluation for David because they apparently to get the approval from the Vatican or whoever, like, because there's a lot of lies told. They didn't actually get approval from the Vatican or even ask for the Vatican for anything. Like, the Vatican was not involved, but Ed likes to throw them in every now and then. But Ed and Lorraine brought their own doctor to do an assessment on David and told Judy, David's mother, that they needed to use their doctor because if they brought in an outside doctor, that doctor would just deem David as crazy and they wouldn't be able to help him.
but it's like if I'm a mother, I want all even with my cat, I'm like, you know what I'm saying? Like if as a mom, if there's something wrong, I want all avenues.
Yes.
I want all avenues open. You know what I mean? Like I'm not telling him. I mean, the first thing I would do is go to a medical. I mean,
I would want it to be mental because then you can at least possibly have a fix available.
Right, treat it. And that's the thing. So Kim says crazy that there are actual recordings of her speaking in different tongues.
Those recordings of Annalise are very frightening. I agree. Those ones are pretty hard to hear, I guess. I don't know if anyone's done any debunking on them. I don't think so. I could be wrong, but they're pretty scary.
Yeah, they are. I've heard them. And it's funny because when I was a part of the group that was ran by, again, the initials are DJ, he also told us not to write anything because we were taking a preternatural class during our training to be into his group. And the preternatural class, we weren't allowed to record. We weren't allowed to write anything down. We weren't allowed to, because in that class, he actually shared some of those recordings.
Oh, wow.
And that was the first time I ever heard anything. They were freaky. Like I can almost still hear it in my head. Like that's how, I don't want to say traumatizing, but that's how, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it was, thank you. Impactful. Do you guys believe in exorcisms?
I struggle with believing in this. I want to believe there's things out there that are still outside, of our understanding and stuff. And I believe in the paranormal, but with the research, the more I research, the less I believe in the necessity of an exorcism, I guess.
Right. I mean, I'm not Catholic. But one of the things that I don't know, I'm probably going to get, some lip for this, but I'm not Catholic, but the fact that the Vatican has training for exorcisms. Somewhere along the line, something had to happen. I'm not saying that this is something that runs rampant throughout the whole world. You know what I'm saying? But something along the line had to happen where
No, yeah,
they had to make this
that's why I
a
want to
thing.
believe, because somebody does, and then we have a whole system for it.
There's yeah, right. And I mean, I know I'm not knocking anybody. I'm a non-practicing Catholic. I was a Catholicism at one point, but I'm not anymore. But you know, just because it's the church doesn't mean that it's also truth either. You know what I mean? I mean, we found that the
Right.
Catholic Church can kind of be a little shady here and there. Not all, but you know. However, the Vatican to me is a little different. I feel like that's on another level of spiritual type of a thing. It's not just, you know what I mean? So I tend to believe that maybe anything's possible, right? I mean,
No,
anything is
yeah, for sure.
possible. Um, I just have never come across
That's how I like to
anything.
see it. Like, I think it's kind of arrogant to say anything is or isn't true without the evidence.
Right. Megan wants to know, what about the exorcism case that The Exorcist was based off of?
Yeah, that is so it's Roland Doe, or his real name is Ronald, I think Hanky. I can't even remember his last name. It's something interesting. But so I'm pretty sure, so there's two things I've heard about this. I've heard that he said it was true and it did happen. And then I've heard that he came forward at one point and said, no, it was not true. I had a behavioral problem, and it was an attention thing. And there's so much to that story, actually, because he had his aunt that he was really close with, who a lot of people believe she had some dealings with some supernatural situations that may have influenced him a little bit. And like, there's all kinds of stuff that's actually inaccurate, like the Ouija board thing and stuff. And that one is a really good deep dive. I would actually like to cover that in an episode one day, and also talk about how Ed tried to insert himself in it.
Oh, really? Wait a minute. What about the most recent one? Is really good. Was it Russell Crowe that was in it?
Oh,
Um,
the Vatican something's priest. What was
yes,
it?
the
Yeah,
the
the
Pope's
Pope's priest
the
or something. The Pope's
Pope's
exorcist.
Exorcist. Yes,
Yes.
the
Yeah.
Pope's Exorcist. That was a great. I love those movies. I do love the
Yes.
movies. I love
Same.
the
I'm a
right
big
with
fan of
Anthony
those.
Hopkins. That was a great one.
Mhm.
I love these movies. Like, but the Pope's Exorcist, isn't that supposedly based on
It's supposed to
true?
be. Father, what was his? Lorraine talks about this priest. I can't think of his name now. Is anyone? Hunkler. Ronald Hunkler was the Exorcist boy's real name. But yeah, well, I can't remember his name, but he was very well known. He was a major, like, he had so many stories and stuff about exorcism and stuff. Yeah.
It's just interesting stuff. The whole story about Emily Rose, she was struggling, then told the entity that you're not taking my soul, but you can have my body. So,
I'm pretty sure, I don't know if she said that in real life, but that was definitely in the movie.
yeah, it was in the movie. Sarah, I truly believe exorcisms are real, but extremely rare.
I can get behind that. Yeah. I feel like it's something also not, like, we as layman people do not understand what all is involved in an actual necessary exorcism.
Right. In a real one. What was the movie? Was it the Dibbit box thingy? What was the movie where it was a rabbi? The daughter was in the hospital, and a rabbi showed up, and they were
I
like,
know what you're talking about, but I can't think of it.
and the parents were like, "Can you help us?" And he's like, "Am I a doctor?" And they said no, and he said, "Then yes, I can." And it was like he went in the. I feel like it had something to do with like a Dibbit box, maybe. I can't remember what the heck that movie
Maybe.
was, but it was a
Yeah.
rabbi. Remember the rabbi? It was like so it was a different side, because most movies like that are based around the Catholic religion.
Right, yeah.
You
And
know,
apparently there are different exorcism rites for each religious branch and such.
right, right, and which is another thing, that you have to take into account when you're going into somebody's house, and they feel that there's something there going on. You have to know the difference of the religions,
Yeah,
because you can't. I mean, if you're going in and you're doing Catholic stuff and they're Jewish, it's not
yeah.
gonna really work.
That's like a really good question to think about that. And when I did my little mini deep dive on exorcisms, I learned that baptism is actually a rite of exorcism.
Yes, it is, and that's before you even do anything.
Yep.
You can't even I
Yeah.
mean, it doesn't make any sense, but whatever. One of the many reasons I left that, I had too many questions revolving around. I'm not a
Yeah.
big organized religion person. You know what I mean? I don't believe in organized religion. And
Same. I'm the same. Yeah.
yeah, and so so Brandon says, I hear you guys, but how come nobody can bring video proof of them?
I actually have a fun answer for this because I just recently heard this. I had no idea this happened, but in the 90s, apparently they televised an
Yes,
exorcism of a
like a
16-year-old
PBS
girl.
or something, right?
Yes, and they had commercials and
I
everything, and
watched it.
I heard about it recently. I haven't found it yet to watch it, but I want to see it and I want to talk about it. But that is so bizarre that they did that.
It was either PBS or ABC. I can't remember.
Yeah, one of the two for sure. Yeah.
I remember watching it. And I was freaked out. I was young. I was little. I can't remember. I literally, I can't believe. And it was like, it was like some well-known show that did it and showed this exorcism of this little, I can't remember if it was a girl or a boy because it was so long ago, but I
think it was a 16-year-old girl.
Yeah. And I do remember it. Now, if I were to watch it today, it might seem a little different than what it did when I was,
right.
12.
Yeah, for sure.
You know what I mean? We all want to know the truth, Kim.
Mm-hmm. That's why I do this for sure. I want to know so badly.
His name is Ronald
Hunkler. That's right. His last name always throws me. Thank you, Jen.
Let's see here. Sorry, the Pope's Exorcist was brilliant. Yeah, it was such a good movie.
Mm-hmm.
It really was a good movie. John says some of these things can be seen as a placebo solution for a placebo effect, like saging and other methods of dealing with spirit. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Sure. Yeah.
Yes, I agree, John. For sure. And it was Reverend Gabriel.
That's Annalise Michael.
That was his name in the movie.
Oh, yeah.
In the Pope's Exorcism, I think.
Yes,
right?
That's Lorraine claimed to have a relic of his.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
But we don't know how true.
Right. She also claimed to have a piece of the cross that Jesus was crucified on, which I did research on that, and that is impossible.
I find it hard. The Possession had the Dybbuk box. Okay. So it was called The Possession.
I remember that movie. Yeah, that was a good movie.
It was. I
was remembering the rabbi situation when you explained it. That popped into my head, and I was like, "Yeah, I remember it, but I don't remember the movie."
Yeah, the little girl had the Dybbuk box. Yeah. Everybody's so. Here's one. The Possession of Michael King was a really creepy possession movie, but I don't think it's based on anything true.
Oh, I've not heard of that one.
Me either.
I'll have to check that out. I love possession movies.
I don't have my glasses. I'm sorry. So they Glitter
Flame, yeah.
Glitter Flame 89. Thank you so much. I'm going to check that out because I have not. I like those kind of movies, and I have not heard of that one. Hey, Elliot. Believe they called her Gina.
Called who, Gina?
Yeah, I don't know what that's in response to.
Was it the exorcism on TV? Oh yeah, the ABC's 2020 and 91 was the exorcism on TV.
Oh, okay. Somebody wrote that? It was ABC 2020. I knew. Did you
Yeah.
hear me? I was like, PBS, ABC
Yeah.
2020. Like, I know it was one of those. I knew it was one of those, and I remember watching. I can't believe my mom actually let me watch it. You know what I mean? Because
So Elliot said, yeah, the exorcism that was aired on TV, that was Gina.
Gina, that's right, and that's how like you used a good word, impactful. Like I remember that. That wasn't her real name though. I don't think. I think they
Yeah,
just
they gave her a stage name, so to speak.
yeah, that was crazy. Um, in the 90s in the UK, BBC TV did the same thing.
Wow, that's pretty
Interesting.
neat.
Interesting. Shared to American Ghost Stories. Do you remember, really quick? Oh, hold on a second. Brad Kling. I love him so much. Read my chapter called The Devil's Advocate in my book Ominous. True exorcism story, as bizarre as it sounds, that we have firsthand knowledge of.
That sounds cool.
Definitely will check that out. I'm a huge fan of
Yes.
yours, Brad, so I definitely will check that out for sure. That's awesome. Do you remember a couple years ago? I keep saying a couple years ago, but it was a lot longer than that. It was, when it was either Harvard, Yale, somebody, one of these big schools was going to do a satanic um, mass on the school at the school. And
I
remember
feel like I remember that. Yeah.
the Pope spoke out and was like, if you go through with this, because I think it was Harvard,
Okay.
the deacon, the main squeeze at the what do they call them, the deacon said, this is a type of a group in our school that's they should be allowed. They were they're like, okay, I see what you're
Yeah.
saying, but how can we stop them from doing it? They were bringing in a group that does satanic, that like they're satanic worshipers, and they were going to do a satanic mass. And I remember the Pope. I remember I was so into it. I was like posting on Facebook because at that time, like I was like a huge believer in all that stuff, right? I thought it was like all like, and the Pope is like, if this is gonna happen, we're gonna have an hour of prayer across the world. Like he's like, I am coming out and I am not condoning this thing to take place. Like they made it this big um spiritual spectacle on the I mean
Wow.
even on the news and stuff. Do you remember that?
I don't remember that. I remember a public satanic thing that got some flack, but I don't remember the Pope getting involved. That's
The
wild.
Pope got involved. He came out and said if this is to take place, he was calling on all Christians and all anybody that is and wanted everybody to have an hour of prayer while this mass was occurring. They wanted almost like we're combating it with good
Yeah,
cross, you know. Um
that's
I don't know if
wild.
anybody else remembers that. I was like obsessed with the whole story. So I was watching it, like, because stuff like that,
Yeah.
you know. Um
Nicholas said it was Harvard in 2014.
okay, let me jump up. Harvard, was it that long ago? Was that long ago? Wow. Um Hold on. Yeah, Harvard, 2014. It was crazy. It was like I was like freaking out. I was so scared about this mass happening that something bad was going to happen. You know what I mean? I remember like oh my gosh, even the Pope is speaking out. And I was like, if I go back on my Facebook page, I'm like, I'm probably gonna like delete, 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 delete.
Yeah.
um Oh, they can't say. Oh, here it was. This is what I was looking for. Another somewhat famous exorcist is Father Vincent P. Lampert. He claims demonic possessions are rare, like 1 out of every 5,000 cases. Rare.
Interesting. Okay.
Oh, I believe that. I can
I
believe that.
really think there is something that we can't explain. I don't know if it's demons. It could be, but like whatever it is, it's outside of our understanding at this point in time.
Yeah, for sure. Um, and I know he's replying to my Brad, and that's okay. I still love you, Brandon. Brad, until I witness one and see video proof, I won't believe. Yeah, I mean, I don't, I can't, I mean,
I want to believe. I am
Anything's
Not
possible.
opposed to it, but proof would be nice.
Yes. I mean, proof would be nice for anything. And proof would be nice for, I mean, obviously, sometimes you do provide proof and people ignore it. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, that too.
you
Yeah, because people want to
yeah,
believe what they want to believe.
exactly. It's all about perception. It's all about what they believe. So even if you are providing proof, that doesn't mean that people are going to
Yeah.
believe it still, you know? Um, so, Nicholas, I've only encountered a demonic activity once. Taryn, you know what I'm talking about, and I've never encountered it after that. Yeah, I've never. Have you ever heard of? Sorry, what? We're gonna end soon. We're gonna end soon. But have you ever heard of Father?
Malachi Martin?
I think he may have had to do with the Warrens at some point and performed exorcisms. I feel like
I think Florio might be doing a deep dive on him. I'm not sure. I know she's looking into some of that. She might be, but yeah, he was said to have been a part of it, a few cases.
it's true, Brandon. That's also true. I've seen a ghost, I believe. And listen, I mean, there's things that happen that when I'm on an investigation, things happen. I hear things that I can't explain. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I can't explain it. What is it? Who knows?
Right.
I always say that us as humans, we have labels for everything. So we label
Yeah.
everything. We have to have a label for everything.
You have a need for it.
Yeah, like in order for us to, understand, we have to have this description. We have to have this. I mean, let's just take Jesus, for example. How do we know he really looked like that?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, it's just.
Yeah, and you'll get people to argue about what he looked like, and nobody really knows.
Nobody really knows. Like, it's like, and that's the thing. Like, and I'm just going to say, let's just say everything does exist that we research and investigate. I may look at something and see Casper the Friendly Ghost. You may look at it and see a Bigfoot. Somebody else may look at it and see an alien. Somebody else may look at it and see a Men in Black. You know what I mean? So, I mean, who knows what it is that people are experiencing? What I hear when we're doing investigations and it gets caught on the recorder. What is it?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like we don't know.
Yep.
No, we don't know. But I've had you for an hour and a half, and I love you so much. I could talk to you all day long. I mean, well, we didn't talk all day long, but I mean, I could keep you on here forever. I want to thank you so much for coming on, and everybody that joined us, the Stevi fans and followers, and the Paranormal Brew fans and followers, and I want to thank everybody for joining us. This was an awesome show, Stevi. You never disappoint, even when you're on somebody else's show. So
I am so excited I got to come on your show. Thank you so much for inviting me. I had so much fun. I love having these discussions with you.
Yeah, it's great. And we'll have to do it again. And
for sure.
I definitely would love for you to come on, and maybe we can pick one of your deep dives, and we can talk about it. I mean, we were all over the place tonight, so I appreciate everybody for keeping up. But I mean, you did great. I loved it. And I want to thank everybody for coming on and joining us. Stevi, Stay amazing, man. I love you.
You too. I love you too.
You're great. Everybody, until next week, sweet dreams.